Did you know that you don't have to believe everything that you read, see, or hear about witchcraft practices and beliefs? I know it sounds pretty obvious, but it's actually something that I see happen a lot. So in today's episode, I want to talk about why I think this happens, ways that you can avoid this type of belief conundrum, and then I want to give some examples of some very popular beliefs in the wider witchcraft and pagan community that I don't actually believe. So if you're ready, come pull up a seat and join me around the cauldron. Well, hello. Welcome, friends. Welcome back. If you're back for another episode, welcome. If you're new here and this is the very first one that you're listening to or watching if you're watching the video. My name is Megan and I am a folk witch and polytheist, and I've been talking on the internet about witchcraft since late 2019, I think, late 2018. Anyway, that's besides the point. Today's episode was inspired by a conversation that I had with someone about chakras. I don't remember exactly what spurred the whole conversation, but we ended up talking about how I don't believe in chakras, and that type of energy system it's just something that isn't true for me in my practice and my belief system. And during that conversation, I remember them telling me that they were glad that I brought that up, and it made them feel better about not believing certain things that tend to be very popular or very widely believed or perceived to be widely believed in the online witchcraft and pagan community. Obviously, I can't really speak to the offline community. My offline community is very small and it's a lot different than the online community. Anyway, so today I want to talk about how you can avoid falling into this trap of feeling like everything you read or see or watch or learn about in regard to a magical practice, how you can avoid thinking that everything is true and that you need to believe everything in order to be a quote-unquote real witch. So I have 4 things listed here as far as why I think this might happen. And you might think like, oh, well, it's obvious that you don't have to believe everything that you read or believe everything that someone tells you about witchcraft and other magical practices. But I find that being in a leadership position in an online community has really opened my eyes to what learning witchcraft and learning paganism and magical practices in today's world actually looks like. Because back when I was learning about witchcraft and paganism, when I first discovered Wicca, there weren't a lot of options. We had books, and then we had a handful of websites that we could access, or that I could access. For reference, I discovered Wicca probably, I want to say the early 2000s. So I was fortunate enough to have more resources at my disposal than a lot of witches who are older than me. But there's a very big difference I'm finding between the older generation of witches who learned from each other and learned from their offline communities versus someone such as myself who discovered magic offline but who has since migrated to an online community, versus people who are just now discovering magic. They have literally so much information right at their fingertips, and it's very easy to get lost in all of that information and to have your intuition and your beliefs and your critical thinking skills really tested and really drowned out by the vast amount of information that is available to us now. So while it may seem obvious to those of us who have been doing this for a while, it's something that new seekers fall into unknowingly. And yeah, so that's what we're going to talk about today. The first reason that I think this happens is that people tend to put a lot of trust in information that comes from a perceived authority. I have talked about authority in terms of content, books and videos and whatnot in previous videos. I will link all of that in the description and in the show notes for anybody who is just listening to the podcast. A perceived authority is someone that a new seeker puts a lot of trust in because they think that because this person has been practicing witchcraft for a long time, or because they have written books, or because they have a podcast, or they make videos on the internet, or because they're a community leader even in their offline space, that those people, they've got to know what they're talking about, right? Everything that they say must be true about how magic works. Everything they say about the gods must be true because they've been doing it for so long, right? In the online world, this perceived authority also interacts a lot with parasocial relationships that people create between themselves and the creators that they watch or the authors that they read. Social media has given everyone sort of instant access to all of these people who are perceived authorities. And I think all of that sort of plays together when it comes to someone who is new to witchcraft, who is sort of, trying to find where they fit and who they need to listen to. But what happens when two perceived authorities, this is difficult to talk about without using like names and whatnot. So what happens when a new seeker is listening to two different people who they perceive as authorities, but those two people have conflicting beliefs about how magic works? What happens? That new seeker is going to be confused because they've put their trust in these perceived authorities and they're contradicting each other. What is the new seeker supposed to do? How can they avoid falling into this trap of not knowing what to do and not knowing who to believe? That's the problem. So this pretty much boils down to practice and skepticism and critical thinking. And then, of course, using your intuition and really analyzing what you believe and why you believe it versus what someone else believes and why they believe it. It's very important when a new seeker comes to the practice for them to learn how to be critical of what other people say and do. And that's not being critical in a negative way. There's nothing negative about this, right? It's okay to be critical of the things that you read and watch. That's how we grow as people, and in a magical respect, that's how we grow as magical practitioners. If I can pick up a book, I don't actually have any witchy books on my desk. Let me grab a book real quick. Okay, I grabbed two books. I grabbed The Witch at the Forest's Edge by Christine Grace, and I grabbed Rebel Witch by Kellyanne Maddox. Both of these people are perceived authorities by some people in the witchcraft community online. Kellyanne Maddox has a YouTube channel. She is a very successful creator on the internet, but she also talks about some wonderful topics and goes really deep into a lot of very important topics and discussions surrounding witchcraft and the magical community. Christine Grace is, or was, I'm not sure if they still have the podcast, but she is the co-host of the Betwixt and Between podcast, and people put a lot of stock in podcast hosts and authors and people who share information in the witchcraft community. So these are two authors who do just that. So if we're going to look at believing things that come from an authority, looking at two separate books is a good thing to do. It's a good practice to exercise like your critical thinking skills and really check in with yourself and what you believe. Off the top of my head, the witches who wrote both of these books have very different practices. They believe similar things, but they also believe wildly different things. So first, let's see if we can find something from The Witch at the Forest's Edge about belief. Okay, here's something. So Christine Grace writes in chapter, I don't know what chapter this is, it doesn't say at the top. If you have the book, it's page 58, the section on creating ritual. This is a basic ritual outline. She goes through her basic outline for how her coven and her tradition structures their ritual. They go through orientation, invitation, and intention, the rising action, the climax, the falling action, and the resolution. Now, obviously, there is more to this, but if you were just learning about a witchcraft practice and you picked up this book, you might think, okay, it's a basic ritual outline. All rituals need to be structured like this because that's how it's written in this book. Now, looking at Rebel Witch, does Rebel Witch talk about ritual? Because Kellyanne Maddox, I believe, is a chaos magician. She practices chaos magic. Let's see. Chapter 14, Rituals and Other Witchy Activities, page 170. Okay, she talks about what a ritual is. Here's a paragraph that differs from what Christine Grace writes in The Witch at the Forest, or The Witch at the Forest's Edge. Kellyanne Maddox, page 171, says rituals don't have to be planned out meticulously and rehearsed beforehand, although it's fine to approach them that way if you want to. Some rituals may come to you more organically and you may flow with the moment, allowing things to develop unscripted. Some of my favorite rituals have been slapdash and spontaneous. But yes, I've also spent hours designing rituals and had everything written out to follow step by step as I went along. It really depends how you're feeling and what seems necessary each time. And in Rebel Witch, there is no ritual framework. So, of course, there's more context to these books. I'm not going to go fully into each of them. I'm just using that as an example on how two different perceived authorities in the community could have two vastly different opinions on the way things work and the way things should be structured. On one hand, there's a basic ritual outline that could or should be followed every time you have a ritual. On the other hand, there is no outline and rituals can be whatever you want in whatever format you want, structured or not. So what I would do is I would encourage a new seeker to take both of those explanations of ritual and really think about how it fits in with what they believe to be true, or how they feel about ritual, or even what ritual means to them. Maybe they don't know what ritual means to them, and that is something that needs further exploration before they figure out how rituals should be structured for their own practice. What I find that a lot of new seekers don't necessarily understand when they come to these practices is that while the information is out there from other people sharing it in books and whatnot, a lot of developing your own practice and beliefs is going to require a lot of personal reflection and introspection about what you actually believe. Because if a new seeker comes to this and they know magic is real, right? They know the gods are real, but they have no real foundation for reflecting on their own beliefs and really analyzing what they know to be true and why, then I think any new seeker is really going to struggle with developing their own practice and finding where they fit within a magical perspective and religious belief system. So let's recap that real quick because that explanation was a little longer than I anticipated. The reason that I think this happens is because new seekers tend to put a lot of stock and importance into what a perceived authority has to say, and how to avoid falling into this trap, or this particular reason, is to practice critical thinking skills and reflect on your own beliefs and be critical of what you believe and what you know to be true. Another reason that I think new seekers come into witchcraft practices or magical practices feeling like they need to believe and do everything that everyone else is doing or saying is because they're afraid of making mistakes. They're afraid of doing it wrong. And when you're afraid of making mistakes and you're afraid of doing it wrong, it can make you think that you need to approach everything that you're doing step by step as meticulously as anyone else is doing it. That you need to adhere to whatever rules or instructions someone else has given you, because then you won't mess up, right? There is a lot of fear with new seekers coming into a magical practice. They can be afraid of messing up a spell. They can be afraid of offending the gods, making the gods angry. They can be afraid of magical backfire, right? This is something that a new seeker just has to work through on their own. But it's going to be difficult for them to work through it if there are still other people out there who are constantly telling them that, don't make moon water on an eclipse because the energy is too chaotic. Or, don't give Hecate an offering of bread because she's going to hate it and she's going to make your life hell, right? There are people out there who speak in absolutes about everything. And when it comes to a magical practice, such as the ones that we see in the online community, there is no such thing as an absolute. Of course, I'm speaking outside of traditional frameworks and religious frameworks that have rules and structure that go along with their religious and magical beliefs. That's a little different, in my opinion. And I find that new seekers generally aren't automatically approaching a structured religion such as Wicca. So I'm here to tell the new seekers that you don't need to be afraid of messing up. You don't need to be afraid of doing it wrong. You don't need to be afraid of making a mistake. Mistakes are how we learn and grow as magical people and just people in general. If you never messed up in your entire life, you will have never learned anything. The chances of doing something wrong during a spell or during working with a god or any other kind of spirit is so, it doesn't even matter, because the chances of something going hugely and horribly wrong are so small that they're almost non-existent. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm not saying that at all. Because when you're first learning witchcraft, for example, and you're performing a spell, chances are that if it's going to go wrong, the only consequence of that is that nothing's going to happen. And that's okay, because again, that's how you learn and that's how you grow. The gods are harder to piss off than you think. They are, in my experience, they are generally very forgiving of new seekers who are approaching them and trying to learn what they can. And as long as they're being respectful, then there's usually not a problem. Now, when you have been doing it for a while, or if you approach the gods with hubris and ego, then you might, that might be an issue. But that's between you and your gods, not anybody else. I don't have any advice really for getting over the fear of making mistakes. That tends to be more of a psychological issue than a magical one. Just know that there are a lot of things that you can control, but there are so many more things that are out of your control that generally aren't worth worrying about. So do the spell, pray to the god, practice your craft, grow, transform, and get better at what you want to do. There's no need to be afraid of making mistakes. It's how you learn. Another reason that I think people fall into this trap of feeling like they need to believe everything that they see and hear is spiritual FOMO, fear of missing out. I think this is made worse by social media and micro content such as 30-second clips on TikTok and YouTube Shorts and whatnot. Those types of content are generally made for entertainment purposes. While they may capture the general feeling of a spiritual experience, they're usually not entirely accurate. I know Frankie, the chaotic witch ant, has talked about this before, and their experiences and explanation on the kind of content that they create on TikTok, or that they created on TikTok. I don't know if they still do, but that it is meant to be eye-catching. It is meant to be entertaining and to keep you engaged so you watch, but that it's not necessarily how things work all the time. And so when a new seeker is watching someone talk about having this profound spiritual experience, and then that person then gives instructions on how to achieve their own profound experience, the new seeker might think that they need to, follow those step by step and believe everything that the other person believes in order for it to work like that, in order for it to happen to them too, because they want to have that kind of experience too. But those kinds of experiences are few and far between. No matter what you might see on the internet, real life witchcraft and paganism is not like those clips that you see on TikTok. There are far fewer profound experiences than the internet makes it out to be, however you say that. Yes, profound experiences do happen, but on an average day, there aren't any profound experiences like that. There aren't any light bulb moments and messages coming directly from the gods or from the universe or from whatever you believe in. It's okay to be an average person without a million profound experiences. You can still have a fulfilling magical practice and religious belief system without feeling like you need to experience everything that everyone else is experiencing. It's important to remember that those types of profound experiences are subjective and they're not going to happen to everyone. And that's got to be okay. You've got to be okay with that. Everyone is going to have a different experience. And what's important is that the experiences that you have are meaningful for you. It doesn't matter if they mean anything to anybody else, because it's not anybody else's practice, right? It's yours. So it needs to mean something to you. That's it. And you don't even need to explain it to anyone else if you don't want to. You don't need to create a YouTube channel or a podcast to come online and talk about whatever your beliefs are or whatever your experiences are. If you feel called to, then great. If you don't feel like you have to do it. I have seen so many people create social media accounts to share about their practices for no reason other than that's what they think they need to do. People feel like they have to share about their practice or it's not real, but that's not true. I could stop the podcast and I could stop making content and delete my website and get rid of everything that I'm doing online in regards to sharing my practice and what I know. And my practice would still be real. My beliefs would still be real. My spells and rituals would still be real. I don't need to prove that to anyone else for it to be meaningful to me. And I don't feel like I'm missing out because other people are having these profound experiences. I'm not, because their experiences aren't meaningful for me in my practice. And I'm not gonna lie, it's taken me a bit to get out of that FOMO type thing. But what's helped, and a lot of people aren't gonna like this answer, but what's helped get me out of this FOMO and comparing myself and my practice to other people has been getting off of social media and just removing the temptation to compare myself and the temptation to scroll and see what other people are doing and hear about other people's experiences. I'm still on Blue Sky, and obviously I'm still here on YouTube and the podcast and whatnot, but I no longer have Instagram. I no longer have a Facebook account for my practice and Round the Cauldron. What else? I don't have Twitter. I don't have TikTok. I don't just scroll and interact with people on social media online and see what other people are doing. Not only has it freed up a lot of time and mental space, it has also helped me realize and see what is important to me, what matters to me in my practice, what doesn't matter to me in my practice, and getting rid of the comparison trap and feeling like I need to do what everybody else is doing because everybody else is doing it. So just remember, FOMO, not real. I mean, it is real. Fear of missing out is real, but you can actively take steps to keep yourself from feeling like that, because trust me, you're not really missing out on anything. If you want to learn something, then learn it. If you want to experience something, experience it. But you don't need to copy what other people are doing to have profound experiences and a fulfilling practice for yourself. You are perfectly capable of doing that on your own without falling into the trap of believing things or pretending to believe things that you don't really believe just so you can make those profound experiences happen. Now, the last reason that I have here is that new seekers and even people who have been in their witchcraft practices for a while, they tend to lack confidence and trust in their own intuition. And this is especially true for new seekers. It's very hard to have confidence when you're doing something that you've never done before. And if you've never connected to your intuition before and never learned to listen to your inner self, then you're going to struggle. And that's normal. That's okay. But when you lack the confidence in yourself and you're still learning to tell your intuition from outside influences, such as the opinions of others, fear, anxiety, cognitive biases. Those are all important things to take into consideration. But this all takes time and it takes practice. You can't just hop right into it and say that everything is your intuition, because that's not going to be true. That's not going to be true ever. Sometimes it is fear. Sometimes it is anxiety. These are all important things to learn about. When you're lacking the confidence in yourself and you're still learning how to trust your intuition, you can find yourself feeling like you just need to believe in everything that is happening, and that it's okay, because even if you're pretending right now, everything will just fall into place in the future, right? But that's not true. If you don't believe in it, you don't believe in it, and that's okay. We're not the belief police, right? I'm not here to tell you, you have to believe it works this way because that's what I say, right? I don't care. You can believe whatever you want about how magic and witchcraft and paganism works. And I will believe what feels right for me. Gaining confidence and learning how to trust your intuition is another thing that takes time. And those are going to be things that can help you really dig into what you believe and why you believe it. And it can help you get rid of some things that you don't actually believe to be true. And let me tell you, when you can finally let go of something that you've been holding on to because it's what everybody else said, so it's got to be true, right? It doesn't feel quite right, but everyone else says this is how it works, so that must be true. When you can finally let go of that, you will feel such a release. Like the burden will be lifted off of you, and it will clearly open pathways of communication and trust within yourself and your intuition that weren't there before. Because when you're so busy holding on to one thing so tight, your hands are not open for receiving. And that is the same that's the same thing for your mind and your heart. And that's how the belief works in my experience. If you're focused on, all of your energy is focused on keeping this one belief alive and rationalizing why you believe it, you're not going to be able to see how everything else is working and why you believe the way that you believe about everything else. I really hope that made sense. I feel like things are just kind of running together with my words right now. When you lack confidence in yourself and lack trust in your intuition, it can be very easy to get bogged down in all of these other beliefs that might not necessarily be true for you. Gaining confidence in yourself and in your intuition and your own practice are going to be the ways to counteract that sort of issue when it comes to figuring out what you believe. So a quick recap of those reasons and how to avoid them. The first reason, the why that I think this happens is that people tend to believe everything that comes from a perceived authority. And you can avoid this by practicing being critical of yourself and other people, using your critical thinking skills, and really reflecting on what you believe and why you believe it. The second reason, new seekers are afraid to mess up. Avoiding this particular issue is more psychological than it is magical. You've got to get over the fear of making mistakes and messing up, because chances are the consequences of your mistakes aren't going to be as life-shattering as you probably think they are. Third reason, spiritual FOMO, fear of missing out because everyone else is doing all of these cool things, so you have to do it too, right? Wrong. Your practice needs to be meaningful for you, and that's it. What other people are doing should have zero effect on your beliefs and your practice. And lastly, lack of confidence and intuition can make you feel like you have to do and believe all of these things, and eventually it's just going to make sense, but that's also not true. And the only way to counteract this is to continue your practice, reflect on what you believe and why you're doing what you're doing, so you can continue to gain confidence in yourself and your practice and trust in your own intuition. So those are the 4 reasons that I think this happens. Those are the 4 ways that I think they can be avoided. Now I want to talk about some things that are really popular in the online spiritual and witchcraft communities that I just don't believe in. Just don't. And the first one is chakras. We all know this westernized version of chakras. Energy centers in your body that spin in certain ways. When they are open, things are good. When they're closed, things are bad. I don't believe in them. Yes, I do believe that we hold energy in our body, but I don't believe that they work the way that westernized chakras say they do. I don't believe like my throat chakra being closed is going to mean that I have issues with my communication. It just doesn't work that way for me. And chakras aren't the only system of like energy centers in the body. There's also the cauldrons of poesy. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but it comes from Irish polytheism. And these cauldrons aren't like chakras. You can't open them or close them. It's a completely different belief system. But that's also not something that I believe to be true as far as the way bodily energy works. I don't have a specific belief in how energy is laid out in the body. It's just there. Some parts of our body can hold more energy than others, and sometimes there are parts of the body where the energy is off balance and that it can affect me physically, but I don't see it like chakras or energy points or anything like that. The next thing is auras. I am not an aura person. I don't believe that we have like energetic body that extends outside of us, that changes color based on our mood or our energetic state or what have you. Again, I do believe that the body has energy. I do believe that our energetic body extends outside of our physical body, but I don't believe that it works the way people say that auras do. It's just not the way it functions for me. Another one is karma. It's another Eastern tradition that's been westernized, and karma isn't something that I believe in at all. Do I think past lives can affect current lives and future lives? Yes, but not in the way of like a karmic balance or anything like that. Just not something I believe. I also don't believe in the threefold law. And this one gets thrown around a lot. And people who tend to believe in the threefold law generally automatically assume that so does everyone else. It's led to some really interesting conversations and some really frustrating conversations, but it is what it is. Scientifically speaking, yes, there is, Newton's law. Is it Newton's law? There's a law in physics that talks about an object in motion, or for every action on an object, there's an equal and opposite reaction. But that doesn't transfer over to everything else outside of physics. And even within physics, when you get into complex systems of science and you try to apply those kinds of physics to witchcraft and magical energy, it just doesn't work. So while the scientific law of physics says if I have one hand out and I have another hand and I'm pushing on my right hand with my left hand, my right hand is resisting and giving the same force that my left hand is if they're staying still, right? If they're not and my left hand is pushing my right hand, then, whatever. I don't understand the physics completely, but that type of scientific connection or scientific law doesn't translate into witchcraft and magical practices. And it has been my experience that the threefold law is not true for me. Another thing that I don't believe in is twin flames. There are just too many people on this planet for every individual to have a perfectly matching soulmate in one capacity or another, whether romantic or platonic. The math doesn't add up for me. And it also negates practices outside of monogamy. There's not just one idea of what a healthy relationship should look like. And speaking of healthy, twin flames tend to have some really toxic behaviors attached to them. There have been explanations of abuse in a supposed twin flame relationship, constant on and off patterns of relationships. You're together, you're not together. You're together, you're not together. One person is running and the other person is chasing. Spiritual bypassing of the behaviors of the people in the relationship because, you're twin flames. It's just part of the growing dynamic of the relationship, right? No, not something that I hold true for myself, period, at all, end of story. I also don't believe in portals. You see in the wider spiritual community, I think it tends to be more of a new age thing than a witchcraft thing. This idea of energetic portals based on astrological occurrences or numerological occurrences such as August 8th, 8/8. It is commonly known as the Lion's Gate portal. Don't believe in those types of things. I don't believe that the numbers being the same and aligning with certain things has anything to do with the kind of energy that is available in the universe for magical people to utilize or work with. I can't get behind it. It feels kind of hokey to me. So portals are not something that I believe in at all. The last thing that I have here, just as far as my notes go, that I don't believe in is the ever benevolent deity. The ever benevolent divinity. So gods and spirits and higher powers. A lot of people believe that gods and higher spirits are always going to have your best interests at heart. And I don't believe that to be true, and it has not been my experience either. People find it easy to believe that they won't hurt you, or they won't do anything to harm you, whether physically or spiritually, mentally or emotionally or whatever, and that they will always try to make you the best version of yourself. I don't believe that at all, and it has not been my experience. Just because they're gods and just because they are higher spirits doesn't mean they don't have their own agendas. It doesn't mean that they have their own interests, their dislikes and likes, and that they have their own plans. They might want to accomplish something in the world, and you come along and you want to work with them. They might use you to get what they want. It happens. And I don't say that as a way to make people afraid, right? I don't think that you should be afraid to work with the gods if that's what you want to do. But obviously, having a system to vet whoever you're working with, having a system to make sure that you're safe and protected the same way you would do if you were meeting up with someone you met on the internet, right? Public place. Tell people what you're doing, tell people where you're going, etc. We vet physical people that we're meeting for the first time. We do the same thing with higher beings and spirits. Pagan gods are not like the Christian God, right? More often than not, you're gonna encounter a deity or a spirit who is neutral. Those instances of spirits doing harm are few and far between. But yeah, pagan gods aren't like the Christian God who only wants your belief and your love and your devotion so that he can send you to heaven and you can have eternal life. I think that new seekers or pagans in general who approach the gods from that perspective, that they're all benevolent and they're all going to have your best interest at heart, might be carrying some Christian baggage, or some like westernized baggage, not necessarily Christian if they were never Christian before. And that needs to be unpacked as you go through your paganism and your polytheistic and witchcraft journey. So just remember that just because it is written or in a video or a popular belief doesn't mean that it's true for you. And that's okay. Be critical of the information that you consume and be critical of your own beliefs. Remember that being critical and going through these stages and steps of reflection and introspection are how you grow. It's how you learn, and that mistakes are part of the process. And it's all right. It's not the end of the world if you mess up. It's not the end of the world if you make a mistake. This is how you become the best version of yourself. And that's what you should be striving for. Because the best version of yourself is going to be the version of you who knows what they believe and who knows why they believe what they believe and who doesn't let the beliefs and opinions of others dictate how you live your life. That's going to be the best version of yourself, and that's what you should aim for. So thank you so much for listening to this episode or watching the video if you're watching the video. If you have an idea or you have a comment or a suggestion, feel free to leave it in the comments. I think Spotify lets you leave comments now if you're watching or listening on Spotify. For those watching on YouTube, make sure that you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and leave me a comment down below. Check out my website where I post a blog usually at least once a week. I also send out a weekly newsletter and do a tarot giveaway every month. All of those links are going to be in the description and in the show notes. And I will talk to you soon. Bye.